Good afternoon and welcome everyone to today's meeting on the Senate Committee on Revenue and Economic Development. Will the Secretary please proceed to call the roll?
Senator Cruz Crawford?
Here.
Senator Steinbeck?
Here.
Senator Stone?
Here.
Acting Chair Donyate?
And I am here, and please mark Senator Neal absent excused. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting. We do have two good presentations scheduled for today. I would also like to welcome folks attending from Las Vegas. I don't see anyone, but also virtually. The two presentations that we have today are the Regional Transportation Commission of the RTC of Southern Nevada, they will provide an overview of their fiscal situation and budgetary projections. And then we also have a presentation from the Department of Motor Vehicles later on that will present on the highway fund and fuel taxes. Of course, after the end of those two presentations, we always have public comment available for folks. Before we go into the presentations, I do want to share some good news. We have been receiving communication from Senator Neal, so she's recuperating really good. We hope that she makes some level of progress, but she has been sending us emails and text messages. I actually got one from her this morning, and so I hope that this news brings to you the same joy that it brought to us. So with that, we're going to try our best to channel our inner Dina throughout these presentations, and we'll get started with the first one. So I'm going to go ahead and call the Regional Transportation Commission if they can get ahead. And today we have a few folks, and so please begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Donyate and members of the committee. And very glad to hear that, that the senator is feeling better, and hopefully that she returns sooner rather than later. So we're thinking about her. My name is MJ Maynard. I'm the CEO for the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. With me is Angela Castro. She's the Deputy CEO. Thanks for having us here today to discuss our funding challenges. We are the roadway funding agency for Southern Nevada, as well as the public transit provider, and we have funding challenges related to both. And so we want to talk about that and also talk to you about our legislative initiatives to help explore particular solutions to the challenges that we face. So just quickly, we're very unique. We're the only agency in the United States that houses all of these functions under one roof. The only agency that we're the public transit provider. We are the Metropolitan Planning Organization, so we work closely with all the jurisdictions to plan roadways here in Southern Nevada. The Roadway Funding Agency, again, work with those local jurisdictions to provide funding for transportation infrastructure. We are the traffic manager for the region, and then we oversee and operate the bike share system in downtown Las Vegas. So again, it makes us very effective because we have all of those functions under one roof. So today I want to focus again on in our role as the roadway funding agency and the public transit provider. We're going to talk about some of the challenges and priorities associated with each. Before we start, though, I do want to recognize the many stakeholders that helped us along the way. We've been working on some of these issues for the last 10 years. We've engaged our board at the various legislative sessions, and also we've worked with, and you'll see here on the slide, something we put together 10 years ago called the Transportation Resource Advisory Committee, or TRAC, and their input has been invaluable, and they've actually helped us advance the recommendations that we're bringing to you today. So this brings us to our first priority, roadway funding. So with the RTC, in partnership with the local governments, we help support the planning, design, construction, maintenance, and operations of over 8,000 miles of roadways. And as if you can see on this slide, that is managing 1,600 signalized intersections on behalf of the local jurisdictions, 1,000 bicycle facilities, over 1,100 CCTV cameras, and so we operate and maintain the NDOT's ITS devices, as well as all the local jurisdictions, managed 74 ramp meters, and over 1,600 miles of fiber optic communications cable. So Southern Nevada, how do we fund roadways? And that's done by three funding sources. As you can see here on the slide, again, motor vehicle fuel tax, sales tax, and fuel revenue indexing. And for those of you that may be unfamiliar with the fuel revenue indexing program, otherwise known as FRI, it's a program that was originally approved here at the legislature in 2013. It allowed the Clark County Commission to to enable fuel tax indexing for 3 years. And then it allowed us to, again, go to the ballot question in 2016 to continue that program for another 10 years. These revenue sources have been extremely beneficial to our community, for every jurisdiction. As Angela goes to the next slide, first and foremost, 702 projects have been awarded, with 453 projects complete. Again, this is over the course of the program, the 10-year program. Through roadway funding in Southern Nevada, again, 702 projects awarded, 78 local small businesses have been impacted. Over $2.9 billion has been awarded in roadway contracts, and more than 20,000 jobs have been created. This revenue provides the necessary funds for the RTC and the local jurisdictions to advance projects that will improve mobility, certainly enhance safety and create jobs to make Southern Nevada the place we all want to live, work, and play. And this slide, this really is a visual of just how impactful the FRI program has been. As you can see, over $2 billion worth of projects has impacted every corner of the valley. This is an important slide. So the blue bars represent motor vehicle fuel tax. And had we not initiated fuel revenue indexing the program, the blue bars represent the amount of funding that would have been available for all of the jurisdictions, again, to maintain and build and advance infrastructure projects within their communities. The orange bars represent the benefit, the revenue that has come from fuel revenue indexing. As you can see in the box to the right, more than $1 billion has been generated by FRI, again, to fund critically needed roadway projects. So we know as a public agency, it's our job to be extremely accountable and transparent when it comes to how we spend taxpayer dollars. And so this slide represents, this is our cash balance for roadways. Every bit of money that we are aware of today and what we could potentially bond in the future is represented on this chart. And so you've got revenues and expenditures, revenues in the blue bars. What I really want to point out here is the cash balance, the gray shaded area in the back. That is the money that we know today we have, again, to continue providing funding to all the jurisdictions for the roadway projects. This, as you can see, if you notice on fiscal year 2027, that's where the cash balance starts declining, and that would take place with the discontinuance of the FRI program. So today, all the jurisdictions do a really good job of spending money. I'm sure you might see a few orange cones or two as you're driving around Southern Nevada. Today, they're spending about between, again, Clark County and all the cities, City of North Las Vegas, City of Las Vegas, City of Henderson, Boulder City, Mesquite, they're spending about $300 million annually on roadway projects. If fuel revenue indexing discontinues, we anticipate that it will fall to about $100 million, that all the jurisdictions will have to share equally on an annual basis, again, to continue maintaining and developing infrastructure. We also asked the jurisdictions, aside from the programs that have been identified as having funding identified by the fuel revenue indexing program, do you have other projects in your area that you'd like to do, but you don't have enough funding to do so? And we heard back that there's over 160 projects that they have on their books today that have no funding identified. And so we, again, certainly understand that, and if you note again on the slide, the cost of those unfunded projects is over $2.7 billion. So the funding that FRI certainly supports today is welcome, but going forward, there are still projects that are needed that have no funding identified. You know, we're a state that has been one of the fastest growing for many, many years. I think it's a state that continues to look to diversify the economy. And if you look on this map, so certainly the jurisdictions have identified 167 projects today that have no revenue identified. Just these areas where there's future growth that have been talked about, economic development, whether it's Apex, El Dorado Valley, Ivanpah, the supplemental airport, or Sloan, that will require additional infrastructure that we do not have the funding for, we haven't begun to account for. So our top priority regarding roadway funding this legislative session is working with the legislators to allow Clark County to continue the successful fuel revenue indexing program, again known as FRI. So our next priority is transit funding. So the RTC provides a broad range of mobility service to our community. We operate as a fixed route system. We operate 39 transit routes with 404 vehicles, over almost 3,700 transit stops. In fiscal '24, we provided nearly 52.2 million passenger trips. Of those trips, 80% are folks that are going to work or seeking employment. We also launched RTC On Demand in West Henderson in the southwest part of the valley. Those were two areas that were pretty much transit deserts, and we had a chance to introduce this on-demand service. It's similar to Uber and Lyft. You can hail a bus to pick you up, and we do so in about 30 minutes and take you within that zone. We also are one of the busiest paratransit operators in the country, and we average close to 5,000 to 6,000 daily paratransit trips. We also have a partnership with Clark County School District and partnered with 21 high schools in Clark County. Those students took nearly 166,000 trips last year. And despite the mobility challenges, we certainly hear from our community that they would like more service and they would like better service. So we do customer surveys just to check with our customers, ask how we're doing. The last customer survey, and this was about 5 months ago, we asked our customers as part of the survey, where do you work, where do you work, and what route are you taking to get to your job? And many of the responses were collected from some of our busiest routes, such as Maryland Parkway, Flamingo, Charleston, Tropicana. On this next slide, in a matter of 2 weeks, we heard back from about 1,200 transit riders, and this is just a snapshot of, in that 2-week time frame, where those 1,200 transit riders are going to work. And as you can see here, and this is just some of them, because we're traveling to over 240 businesses, that literally every day there are employees taking transit to their jobs across the entire Clark County Valley. And so it was, again, it just confirmed what we knew, but it really kind of packs a punch when you see that just in a 2-week time frame, that you've got so many folks that are accessing transit to get to work. So public transit really is part of the economic ecosystem in every community. We also asked our customers, not only where you're working, but what do you do? Who are you? And they, if you see here, they're admin assistants, they're assistant managers, they're retail associates, they're baristas, they're caregivers, they're cashiers, porters, chefs, housekeepers, construction workers, convention staff, custodians, dealers, front desk attendants, medical assistants, food servers, show ushers, teachers, and traffic attendants, just to name a few. So how is transit funded? So now that you know about how we're about our customers, this is how we're funded. And we have done our research. We know that many communities, we ask, how do you fund public transit in your communities? And it's usually a variety of options. Here in Southern Nevada, it's based on sales tax. You can see here that's the majority of the funding source, as well as passenger fares and grants. So we go after every grant that we can. Federal grants mostly pay for our buses. We have a formula fund from the FTA, Federal Transit Administration. And so it's sales tax can be one that's not quite as consistent depending on what the economy is. And so, of course, during the Great Recession and during the pandemic, we saw quite a significant drop in how we fund transit, just based, again, on that sales tax. So a little history on sales tax and how RTC is funded. In 1990, the general public approved an advisory question to support transit. The state legislature and the county commission then approved a 0.25% sales tax, effective July 1, 1991. Then in 2002, the general public approved another advisory question to support transportation. And again, the legislature and the county commission approved another 0.25% sales tax that became effective October 1 of 2003. So today, the RTC receives 0.3% of sales tax that is dedicated to transit. We know in our research that the RTC, we receive well below the mean in terms of funding. The next slide will point to that. When we compare our sales to other communities, we invest $121 per capita annually, which is significantly less in comparison to other communities where they invest anywhere from $91 to $351 more per capita. And it's, again, it's not usually just one source. What we learned is that public transit systems around the U.S. are funded by either sales tax, property tax, a DMV fee, a TNC fee, things like that. It's usually more than one bucket of a funding source. And what's important to note here, you see Orlando and Las Vegas are on the end where we invest less, or these are the two only bus-only modes from Salt Lake City all the way to Portland. They invest more, but they also provide more multimodal options such as light rail or commuter rail. But I'm proud of the work that the team does. We consistently get, per the National Transit Database, we get ranked as the most efficient bus system in the U.S. We're the 12th busiest bus system in the United States, and I think that always surprises folks because if you don't take transit in Southern Valley, you wouldn't know that. But we have the highest fare box to recovery ratio. So that means we collect more money at the fare box than any other bus system in the U.S. We all have the lowest operating cost and the lowest subsidy. And we again, hats off to the team that makes that work. They do a great job. And we'll talk about our cash balance. Again, this is everything that we know in terms of what we have today and where we're projecting what the future looks like. So we've been discussing public transit and the need for more funding since the 2017 legislative session, because we knew, as we forecast out 20 years, we knew back in 2010 and then 2012, 2015, we knew that we were going to run into this fiscal cliff. So what you see here is the revenue expenditures, revenue, and the darker bars. The gray area again is where I want you to focus, and that's our cash balance. And what you see here is in fiscal 25, fiscal 26, and fiscal 27. So we're in 25 right now. We have expenditures that exceed revenues. Now, we learned a lot during the pandemic, and we learned, we thought we were going to start cutting transit services as early as 2020. And then we received, the stimulus skies opened up, and we received over almost $304 million in stimulus funds that allowed that gray area, that cash balance. Because of the stimulus funds that we received of the pandemic, Angela, we're going to be able to balance the budget this year and then the next 2 fiscal years. But then because that stimulus money has run out, we run the risk of now dipping into our 6-month reserve. It's a board policy. It's a board policy to have 6 months of cash in reserve to operate transit. In fiscal 28, we're projecting an $85 million deficit, and as you can see, the rest of the bars, it just gets worse, and the trajectory is not where you want it to be. So, we've been talking about this. If we don't find an additional revenue source, we may have to start looking at cutting transit services as early as fiscal 27. And then again in 28, in order to balance that deficit, we would need to reduce transit by about $136 million and then maintain that again through the outer years. Next one, Ange. So how do we get here? We just dropped this big problem in your lap, and how did this happen? We learned a lot during the pandemic, through the Great Recession, understand that we need to operate as efficiently as we can internally, because the last thing we ever want to do is cut transit services. We've had to do that during the pandemic. We had to do that during the Great Recession. Things post-pandemic have been, we've seen, again, labor costs have gone up by double digits. We're still having a supply chain as it relates to how we procure our buses. We have over 800 buses that we buy every year, or that we operate every year. Our demand for mobility in the residential areas continues to grow. For the first time, we saw a decrease in sales tax. It's a trend we're going to follow very closely. And then back in the day, Las Vegas, the service we operate in the resort quarter, we were the only transit system in the United States that generated a profit. And about $6 million every year, and we use that profit to help supplement our residential service. Since October 2015, when Uber and Lyft started operating in the resort quarter, we've seen a steady decline in ridership and revenue since then. Post-pandemic, we're still not quite where we need to be, but certainly not having a system that can help us fund the general market has definitely made its mark. And this is just, next slide. So this is just an example of what we do when we have to face, how do we balance our budget? And again, we look at internally, how do we address that? We know how much our customers and our passengers rely on us to get around, to get to school, to get to work, et cetera. So we have deferred capital projects, we've cut contracted services by 15%, we have implemented a hiring freeze, a wage freeze, we've had to increase passenger fares. When we've done all that, and we continue, again, to look at how we can be as efficient as possible, because we don't want to cut transit service, the deficit is just so large that even doing that isn't going to solve our transit problem. So again, it's looking for, what tools are in our tool belt so that we can address this deficit that is devastatingly large. Angela, next. And, when you put aside the next couple of slides together, it's hard to see because you see the story in black and white, but if we're not able, again, to find a revenue option or options to support and sustain public transit in Southern Nevada, we'll have to eliminate 7 routes. This is beginning in 2027. We'll have to partially eliminate 20 routes. We'll have to reduce RTC on-demand zone, and that's the zone down there in the bottom corner, by 50%. We'll reduce game day express service, by 3 locations, so in half. The cuts will reduce our paratransit service. And so, as the public transit provider, the law says we must provide paratransit service within a 3/4-mile boundary of fixed route. That is, we are required to do that, but we're not required to do anything else. We don't have to provide veteran service, but we do. We don't have to provide services for seniors, but we do. We don't have to provide service to Game Day Express or to sporting events, but we do that as well. We don't have to help students get to school, but we know how important that is, so we do that too. We anticipate that, these cuts will impact about 19% of the population, or 343,000 residents who will not be able to access transit. We also are a funder for many of the nonprofits and for rural transit in Southern Nevada. It's certainly going to have an impact to our Community Mobility Grant Program, our match to Southern Nevada Transit Coalition's Boulder City Service, adult daycare transportation services, veteran medical transportation services, the paratransit service that's on demand. In fiscal 28, again, so that we can get to that $136 million to balance the budget, to balance that deficit. We would have to now eliminate over half of all RTC routes, so we have 39, so 19 would be reduced. RTC, we would reduce the on-demand zone by over 63%. We would eliminate 2/3 of Game Day Express routes to just 2 locations to get to T-Mobile or Allegiant Stadium. Reduce the paratransit service, which would now impact about 8,400 paratransit customers. We anticipate that these cuts will impact 58% of the population, or 900,000 residents who will not be able to access transit. This would eliminate service to nearly 900,000 residents who would be incapable of accessing transit. It would make over 280,000 jobs unattainable to reach. Fewer than 42% of Valley residents would be within half a mile of a bus stop, compared to today, it's about 83%. With all these reductions, many key locations, including some providing essential services, will lose transit access, including 7 major hospitals, access to the VA Hospital and Medical Center, limited access to Nevada State University, College of Southern Nevada, Henderson, and Rosemont University, more than a dozen CCSD high schools, grocery stores, community and senior centers, Opportunity Village Ingolstadt campus, the Henderson campus is soon to open, Northwest campuses, libraries, Amazon's Fulfillment Center, Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and then several major local casinos. So these, it's a lot. And it's something, again, that we've been trying to address for the last 10 years. These, as you can see from the slides, they would have an enormous impact on our residents and somewhat to our tourists, mostly our residents. So for these reasons, we believe it's important for the public to weigh in on what they would like to support and what does the future funding for transit look like. And so our top priority for transit funding this session is AB 28. Which would extend the RTC's authority to recommend a sales tax ballot question to the Clark County Board of Commissioners. Faced with a deficit that is this large, we understand that there's really no one revenue source or tool that can solve this problem. over the last 8 years, the many times that we've presented to the legislature, and as we've convened our track committee to help us figure out, what is the best approach, what are the revenue options that we could look at to address this issue. We've confirmed that the best approach will be to use the funding tools, again, from multiple areas. So Assembly Bill 28, however, represents an important first step by extending our authority to request a ballot question and seek input on the future of our transit system. And I want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to present to you today, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
So much. Committee members, do we have any questions? Senator Steinbeck.
Thank you for your presentation. And I don't think a lot, I just want to make a quick statement on how incredible RTC is as a partner with public safety. It's an instant shelter. It's a, instant place to go ahead and make a cooling center. And, in the past, been able to utilize you guys very, very well. My question for you, though, is that what are your actual occupancy rates on the buses, and how many residents or how many people utilize them each day?
That's a great question. I came from the private sector, and so before I joined the RTC 18 years ago, I used to think, why are they running empty buses? I happen to live out in Henderson. We have one of the most, again, because we're the most efficient, we operate at almost full capacity. When you get on a bus at the end of a line or the beginning of a line, it's empty. But by the time you get to the midway point, you have to have enough room for that capacity. So today, I think we're operating, and I'll have to get back to you on the exact numbers, but we just had to submit some information to the Federal Transit Administration. We utilize our buses more than almost any public system except for New York MTA. So I'll get you those numbers because it's a great question. Because if you're not in it, you don't see it. And depending where you live, it may look like the buses are empty. Certainly, the buses the newer the buses, the outlying areas, so Henderson, anything along the periphery of Clark County, are not as productive as the rest of the other routes, but they're all very highly utilized. And so I'll be more than happy to share that with you, Senator, because I think it's a great question.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Senator Stone.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and very impressed with all the various things you do, Metropolitan Planning Organization and providing the busing service. As you know, I'm new to the legislature. I was here one session ago, first time on this committee, and you talked about the fuel revenue indexing. It's kind of a foreign concept to me. Can you tell me fuel reserve indexing 101, tell me the origins? And
Absolutely.
It sounds like it was a 10-year measure, I presume. It authorizes the Board of Supervisors to impose some kind of a tax, and it probably has to be renewed. Is that what AB 20?
Senator, that's a great question. First and foremost, it has the ability, when you index fuel tax to inflation, it has the ability to keep up the cost of again, maintaining roads and building roads. So it maintains that funding capacity. When we came to the legislature in 2013 and got that enabling legislation that allowed the Clark County Commission to index for 3 years, an indexing program with lots of guardrails. So the max would be 10 cents over 3 years. Then we would go out to a ballot question. And we did that in 2016, and it passed overwhelmingly, which allowed us, again, with a lot of boundaries in place, to index fuel tax inflation for another 10 years. So I'll give you an example. Out of the 75 cents of taxes, every time you go to the pump and you fill up, there's 75 cents worth of taxes. It goes to the state, the county, the RTC. In the 10 years that the program has been in place, it's impacted, it's raised 15.6 cents for every gallon. So it is, because I think the legislature and the particular Clark County Commission did a really good job in ensuring that it wasn't this runaway train. It was very, very constrained, and it really looked at the rolling PPI, the CPI, and how that was going to work. Just, it's, again, as a measure against inflationary impacts. And Senator, Angela just reminded me, I think you might have been asking about the ridership per bus, but of the over 52 million riders that we move every day, every single day across the valley, about 153,000 daily boardings. So I can break that down by route if you'd like. I'm sorry.
Any other questions? Senator Cruz Crawford.
Sorry, thank you, Chair, trying to move this along. But I do know that we do use in Clark County, the buses, like you mentioned, for the school district. Are those reimbursed through the school district, what they would pay for transportation? And then I have one follow-up question.
Senator, thanks for the question. Yeah, Clark County School District, they currently buy the passes for the students. If, for example, we usually look for a transit line that runs adjacent to a high school. If it was a transit line that was very, very busy and we had to insert another bus, there'd be an additional cost, but so far that doesn't happen. So they today provide all of the passes for their students.
I get bus passes for my families that are homeless of the school I'm a principal of. Are those bus passes free or reimbursed through an organization?
We have a couple programs for all nonprofits. Everything is half off, 50% reduction. We also have something called the Community Mobility Grant Program. Every 16 months, if you're a nonprofit, you can apply for $1,800 worth of free passes. So we do that as well.
I know that's not going to offset the big gap in revenue, obviously, but those are just really important programs, so I want to make sure those are balanced. When you had the survey, okay, thank you, Chair. When you had the survey, I want to know the actual impact on our economy. Do you have in that survey asking them how they would get to work, or if there was not a service, or what kind of shift they'd have to make, like maybe working closer to home? Do you have any questions?
No, but I do think as we get, and certainly my deputy CEO with me, Angela Castro, and Angela and her team do a lot of the outreach. The plan really, certainly working with all of you first to talk about AB 28. But we'll be out with the community. We spend a lot of time with the community and understand what their mobility needs are. And as we get closer to talking about, potentially about question, another source of funding for transit, is questions that you're asking are questions we'll need to ask as well. You're welcome.
Any other questions? There we go. The only one that I had was more of a historical context for some of the members. Can you explain, so obviously, right, there's been the reduction in revenue has occurred over time. We had the COVID-19 pandemic, and so we were saved by the ARPA dollars. Now the ARPA dollars are ending, so there's going to be you are going to experience the fiscal cliff, catching up to the shortfall that we have from revenue. And so what's leading to that? I mean, obviously EVs are one example because they don't purchase gas, which we use for fuel indexing. There's the conversation of when Uber became legalized, that's less ridership because folks weren't taking buses to go to the Strip. And so give us the historical context as to why we're seeing the decrease in revenue and why it's important for us to address it now. Otherwise, we're going to be in a position of having to cut the critical needs that our constituents rely on.
So as far as fuel revenue indexing, which is, again, a very, very important program, we are the road funded agency. We know that, and we knew back before we started our legislative efforts in 2013, again, by forecasting out our cash flow, that the amount of funding that was dedicated, the 9 cent, the motor vehicle fuel tax, was not going to be enough to keep with our growing valley. We certainly have seen a decrease, an ongoing decrease in the gallons of gas sold per capita. There are more fuel-efficient vehicles on the road. The adoption of electric vehicles continues to increase. And at some point in the future, and certainly we're addressing here locally with our FRI program, but I think at the national level, there's a conversation around how does roadway funding look in the future when you've got EVs. Again, the adoption rate continues to grow. So that's one thing. On the public transit side, we haven't invested in mobility since 2003. We have been one of the fastest growing regions in the United States for years. I think that we saw it coming because of those reasons, right? More demand than we had. Then the Great Recession, because our funding is based on sales tax, we had a huge hit there, and we were forced to reduce transit service. With Uber and Lyft coming to town, again, that we have seen again since October 2015 a steady decline of revenue and ridership that was exacerbated by the pandemic. we made money today, now it's one that is subsidized. And then more recently, just in the last 24 months, based on labor contracts, and again, some of the stuff, we've had a double-digit, over 35% increase in the cost of providing transit service, prepared transit fixed route. We've seen a 34% increase in our security contractor. We have a new contractor. We have, all of our officers are now armed. We have more officers based on, the community asking for more safety, the operators. Fuel is up. We have seen the cost to buy our vehicles, it's increased by 50%. And so where we can control expenses, we do, but there are some things, I think, we're not the only industry that's been impacted by rising costs, and it certainly has impacted us. But Uber and Lyft in the resort quarter was for us, again, that was probably the biggest eye-opening at that time, again, based on a route that the rest of the United States was envious of, that the RTC makes money in that resort corridor. We don't do that anymore. But it's a cost, and sales tax can be problematic if there's a downturn in the economy.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? All right, it sounds like if we have any questions, we'll take it offline, but we
Vice Chair,
appreciate.
thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you. Thank you for coming. We're going to move on to our next presentation. So if our folks can come forward, we have the folks, an overview of the Department of Motor Vehicles with several folks joining us. So if you can please begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, committee members. Chair, for the record, Angela Smith-Lamb, Deputy Director for the Department of Motor Vehicles. And I'd first like to say I'm glad to hear Senator Neal's doing well. That's very encouraging. And from her friends at DMV, we wish her a very speedy recovery. And many of you may have seen this presentation, but it's switched up a little bit, so hopefully it's not as boring as it's been in the other ones because you've seen it multiple times. So we'll give you a bit of an overview just so that you remember how our organization is structured and our revenue and funding, and then we'll hand it off and get deeper into our tax and revenue collections. Joining me today is Bethany Musselman. She's the administrator over our fiscal operations, and Karen Stoll, she's the administrator of our motor carrier division. And of course, Sean Severs here in the audience, and he's our tech guy today, but also our legislative liaison. So if you guys ever need help, Sean's your guy. So the DMV is comprised of 7 divisions supported by the Director's Office. There are 1,292 authorized FTEs and 18 offices statewide, 2 of which primarily focus on commercial services. DMV continues to partner with county assessors and AAA offices for vehicle registration transactions. In addition, there are more than 50 kiosks across the state that are not shown on our slide, but are on our website. The department completes roughly 8 million transactions annually for an average of 28,000 each business day, and approximately 5 million of those are financial transactions. The DMV is primarily funded with highway funds, fees, cost allocations, commissions, and fees collected by the department. While DMV receives general funds for automatic voter registration, it's a very small amount of our funding. DMV is subject to a cap on the amount of highway fund appropriations it can receive for operations. The cap is at 22% right now, or has been in the past, but right now it's at 27% to account for our transformation efforts. The cap is set to return to 22% in '26. With the continuation of our project efforts, we need to extend that cap to 27% through the biennium. Collection of fees is done through various customer-facing divisions within the department. Our motor carrier division collects more than half of the highway funds collected by the department through fees, but primarily they collect fuel taxes. And while our administrative services division collects some revenue, they are responsible for the reconciliation and the distribution of our revenues collected. In FY '24, the DMV collected approximately $1.8 billion. That $1.8 billion collected by the department is divvied up as reflected on this slide, with a significant portion of those funds going to counties, school districts, and the highway fund. DMV gets a portion of the fees for operational expense at around 6%. While DMV experienced a dip of revenue collections during the pandemic, we've seen continued growth over the last several fiscal years with an increased revenue collection of 4.5% over FY '23. Based on current trends, DMV is projecting overall revenue growth of 2.89% over the next biennium. DMV will continue to refine projections, or what we call our Blue Book, and update projections based on trends in March or April of this year. These charts illustrate DMV's funding sources for operations. As previously identified, roughly 46% of DMV's funding comes from highway funds, but more than half of our funding, at just over 53%, comes from revenues such as fees and commissions. Yes. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Bethany Musselman.
Good afternoon, Bethany Musselman for the record. As stated previously, revenue collected by DMV is made up of various registration and licensing fees, with a little over 36% being distributed to the highway fund. 85% of the revenue collected is from taxes, including governmental services tax, sales tax, and fuel taxes. I'll give you a quick overview of governmental services tax and then hand it to Karen Stoll for an overview of fuel taxes. Governmental services tax, otherwise known as GST, is collected during the registration of a vehicle and is calculated on the depreciated value of the vehicle. The calculation is dependent on the vehicle type, weight, age, and MSRP. Heavyweight commercial vehicles also take the number of axles into account. The amount collected for BGST is split into 5 categories: DMV commission of 6%, highway fund allocation determined using similar vehicle information, school operating funds, school debt funds, and the county in which the vehicle is operating, and in the county in which the vehicle is based, The percentages for school operating, school debt, and the county are set by Department of Taxation and are updated annually. Supplemental governmental services tax is calculated in the same manner as basic governmental services tax, but at a quarter of the amount. SGST is split with 6% retained by DMV for commission and the remainder sent to the county in which the vehicle is based. Currently, SGST is only collected by Churchill and Clark counties. And now I will pass it to Karen Stoll.
Good afternoon, committee members. For the record, my name is Karen Stoll, Administrator of Motor Carrier Division, Budget Account 4717. Fuel taxes are collected monthly by us from licensed fuel suppliers. Suppliers collect the fuel taxes and fees from entities that they distribute the fuel to, and then they file their fuel tax return and pay the fuel taxes, cleanup fees, and inspection fees. For fiscal year 2024, we collected about $873 million, of which about $663 million was motor fuels, which is like gas, gasohol. And $210 million was special fuels, which includes diesel. For the gas and gasohol, you will hear us talk about the 23 cents Nevada state tax for fuel. It's actually comprised of several components. So we collect about $150 million annually in the state's 12.65 cents for gas, gasohol, and collections for gas, gasohol for the 5 cent per gallon is about 59 million annually. We collect the fuel taxes enacted by the counties too, such as fuel taxes and option taxes and index taxes. The distribution allocation for the county 5.65 cents, which is part of that 23-cent state tax, is distributed by allocation percentages set forth by demographic, population, and road miles reports. And those are provided to the DMV annually by the Department of Taxation and the Department of Transportation. We collect approximately 63 million annually of the 5.35 cents per gallon. In addition, counties enacted option fuel taxes for gas and gasohol from 4 cents per gallon up to 9 cents per gallon. Collections are approximately 106 million annually. Also, there is a 1 cent per gallon fuel tax for gas and gasohol at approximately 12 million annually. Included in the previous mentioned in distribution for motor fuel is jet fuel and aviation fuel. So the state jet fuel, approximately 4.4 million. For the county option, 12.6 million annually. For aviation fuel, approximately 35,000 annually, and the county option aviation fuel, about 14,000 annually. We collect special fuel state tax annually, which includes diesel, at approximately 133.6 million. As of fiscal year 2024, 10 of the 15 counties that are eligible to enact the diesel county option fuel tax from Senate Bill 48 in the 2019 session have done so at 5 cents per gallon. As of fiscal year 2024, we collect approximately $7.1 million in the diesel county option fuel tax. Clark and Washoe counties have both enacted fuel indexing on gas, gasohol, and special fuels. And you can see in that slide that Washoe County has both the consumer price index, which that's what they started out with, and now it's a fixed, it doesn't adjust anymore. And they also have the producer price index, which is based on the highway construction. There's several PPI indexes, and that's the one that the law has. So in gas and gasohol and special fuels, we collect about $268.6 million for these counties in index taxes. Of that, Clark County for gas is about 64% of that, and Washoe is about 36%. For special fuels, Clark is about 54% and Washoe is 46%. Of the overall, gas represents 81% of those index taxes and special fuels 19%. So slides 17 and 18 speak to petroleum cleanup fees. These are fees collected and passed on monthly to the Environmental Protection Division of Environmental Protection. Currently, we collect approximately $13.7 million annually of these cleanup fees. They are paid to Nevada by the fuel suppliers with their monthly fuel tax returns and payments. And it's assessed on fuels that are imported into Nevada or manufactured in Nevada. The Petroleum Fund is administered by the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, NDEP, and they pay claims submitted to them by those who are participants of this fund for like leakage and seepage, any type of a catastrophe such as that. And they are, NDEP is the subject matter expert on that fund. If there are excess funds at the end of the fiscal year for amounts over $7.1 $1.5 million after everything else that's allowed in NRS 445C.350. The overage that's left is sent to the fund referenced in NRS 408.242, which is to NDOT, and it's used exclusively for the construction, reconstruction, improvement, and maintenance of public roads. Now, these funds that are the overages are set forth in the law, and it says that they're distributed in July and December of each year, and the NDOT director allocates them by 70% of the money in the account to a regional transportation commission in a county whose population is 700,000 or more. Then 20% of the money to an account to a regional transportation commission in a county whose population is 100,000 or more, but less than 700,000, and 10% of the money in the account to the department for use in counties that have a population of less than 100,000. So historically, the cleanup fees that have been sent to NDEP have been ranging from what it was in 2024 at around $13.7 million, and then 2021, it was around $14 million. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you so much. Committee members, do we have any questions? Senator Cruz Crawford.
Hi, thank you so much, Chair. A question, why does only Clark and Washoe have index fuel taxes? I'm just curious.
Through you, Chair, okay. Thank you, Senator, for the question. So they were allowed to vote on that. It was, the RTC sort of talked about the way that worked was, it was a law that was passed. And the first Washoe County enacted it, and then several years later, Clark County enacted it. And then there was a vote, and the counties that were going to vote on it didn't pass it. Now, the diesel tax for the state of Nevada, up until those two counties started doing indexing, that all goes to the state highway fund. Now there's the index taxing for Clark County and Washoe County. And then in 2019, there was a bill that was set forth, and they kind of referred to it as the small county. And they were eligible to pass, to get additional funds up to 5 cents per gallon for diesel. And 10 of those counties have done that.
Thank you so much. It's not lost on me that obviously Washoe and Clark make significantly more money on that, but I was just interested in that. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Stone.
Thank you. When I look at your state fuel tax rates per gallon, I noticed that jet and aviation are particularly low compared to all the other forms of gasoline. Is there a reason why it's so low?
Well, again, that it's set forth, oh, I'm sorry, my name is Karen Stoll, for the record. It's set forth in law, those were passed at those rates, and that's why at a certain point, they were, the counties were allowed to do optional jet and aviation taxes. The aviation portion of the state aviation portion is Civil Air Patrol.
Thank you for the question. When was the last time, when did we, do you have any historical context as to when that was passed and when was the last time we looked at it?
For the record, Karen Stoll, Motor Carrier Division. Is the question on the jet, or I don't know and I don't have it with me, but I can get it for you.
Oh, okay, thank you. And then I guess the other thing, I mean, obviously, this is more of a philosophical question. Feel free to push back. You know, we've obviously have talked about the increase of electric vehicles coming onto the road and what that can do to impact the highway fund, et cetera. And so there's been talks about perhaps when folks that have electric vehicles come back for their registration through the DMV that they pay a higher percentage because they're not paying for the fuel that we're taxing everyone else. So can you provide maybe just a context for us of how this has come to fruition in terms of the legislative conversation, or if maybe there's some advice that you could give us on to like how we can address this? And it's more so because of the RTC conversation that happened earlier, so.
The question, Senator. For the record, Angela Smith, Deputy Director, DMV. It's been a long-standing question. To the question you asked about how long has it been since there's been a change in the taxes, it's been a really long time. And I think Karen probably has the state gasoline, gasohol, and diesel or special fuel taxes haven't changed in a number of years. So the structure hasn't changed while technology has. And so it's not keeping up with electric vehicles. Obviously, they're not paying anything for the miles on the road. And the tax was designed to have people pay their fair share for the road on their miles on the road. With them not contributing, it certainly has an impact. But I would say this has been looked at multiple times. I've been on a few committees with NDOT and RTC and several other individuals, and it has been a growing problem long before EVs. I think RTC kind of alluded to it. As vehicles become more fuel efficient, the model that was designed for fuel never changed. So you were already in arrears before the electric vehicles hit the road. It just continues to add to the problem that you don't have enough revenue to support the needs. Add to that inflation, yes, our revenues increase, but not at the rate that keeps pace with everything and the cost of construction and road maintenance and all of the things that are needed from highway funds. That's as much as I can offer unless you have a more direct question.
No, I think that was what I was trying to ask in terms of, why are we experiencing these revenue shortfalls and challenges? And it's not just the EVs, right, that are coming to the market. There's a whole wide range of issues, and we've projected this over time. We've seen the issues. It's just we haven't taken action to address them, or if we have, right, it's been pretty stagnant, and we're going to continue seeing the shortfalls until some action occurs. So, okay, Senator Cruz Crawford.
Thank you, Chair. Being part of the Revenue Committee, I'm always trying to figure out ways to increase revenue. I saw, I think it was slide 10, that was talking about the fuel supplier collection. They can retain 2% of their collection allowance for paying on time, correct? How much is that? Like money do we lose out by them paying in time? Like, is this like really a helpful enforcement tool, or?
Record, Karen Stoll, Motor Carrier Division. I know that we have that number because we put it on our expenditure report that's on the Department of Taxation. We capture that. But I can tell you that it is also for any type of loss that supplier might have. So if they have any type of somebody puts the wrong kind of fuel into, like they put gas into a diesel tank, they have to pump it out and they have, damaged gas or diesel. That's a loss. We didn't make that error, so we don't reimburse them for the fuel taxes on that. That's absorbed, and that's part of that 2%. Those kind of losses come out of that. It can be significant, especially when you have a supplier that's paying you $6 million a month in fuel taxes. And it's a lot of money.
Besides on that 2%.
For the record, Karen Stoll, that is also in the law. And that was something that was passed many years ago. And it is a reduction of the tax amount. So it hits, everything from the state all the way to the counties, everybody that pays a fuel tax.
Have people looked into changing that to like 1%? Just as when it was enacted, it sounded like there was less amount. Now there's a lot, so it's a huge burden. I mean, it sounds like, I don't know. Has anyone talked about that adjustment?
For the record, Karen Stoll, I know there's been discussion, but there hasn't been anything real recently that I'm aware of.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for coming. We greatly appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have any follow-up questions offline, so thank you so much. That concludes the presentation items. We're now going to go to public comment. If there's any one in Carson City, anyone in Las Vegas, and AVH, anyone online.
If you'd like to provide public comment, please press *9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and close public comment. That concludes the agenda items for this week. We're still working on the agendas for the following meetings, so we'll try our best to post them as soon as we can, and we greatly appreciate everyone for joining. So thank you so much, and meeting's adjourned.